After ascending the Gupta throne, the most important campaign that Chandragupta II led was against the Shakas of Western India. To understand this campaign, we have to first look at the political map of this period. The Gupta Empire, which Chandragupta II had inherited, was mostly won by Samudragupta. And it was during the reign of Samudragupta that in central India, the Gupta Empire had reached up to the Narmada river. Beyond Narmada lay the territory of the Vakatakas. In Western India, we see that it was the Western Kshatraps who were ruling the region of northern Gujarat and Kathiawad. The Western Kshatraps who were ruling this region had a long history, and from their coins we learn that they had been ruling this territory for at least 300 years. And during the period of Chandragupta II, it was either the Western Kshatrap ruler Rudrasim III or one of his successors who were ruling the Shaka territory. Now what we see is that during this period, the Western Kshatraps were not as powerful as they were during the reign of one of their greatest ruler, Rudradaman. But this does not mean that they were a minor power. They still had control over the western coast and particularly rich ports. And it was most likely this western trade that was one of the reasons why Chandragupta II invaded the Western Kshatrap territories. But this was not the primary reason. One of the main reasons, according to some scholars, has to do with the civil war between Chandragupta II and his elder brother Ramgupta. And it appears that the Western Kshatraps did try to meddle into this civil war. And it was their meddling that was a bone of contention for Chandragupta II. Now this is only one view, and there are some scholars who believe that most important reason for Chandragupta's invasion was the motivation to end the Shaka rule in Western India. V.S. Smith writes that we may feel assured that the difference of race, creed, and manners supplied the Gupta monarch with special reason for desiring to suppress the impure foreign rulers of the West. So this is what V.S. Smith believes. And what we see is that when Chandragupta II ascended the Gupta throne, the fact that this Shaka territory was not conquered by Samudragupta meant that for Chandragupta II, in order to show that he is the true inheritor of the throne of Samudragupta, it was his duty to conquer the Shaka territory of Western India. But before embarking on any great military campaign like this, what Chandragupta II needed was allies. And one of the most important ally in this whole campaign was going to be the Vakatakas. Vakatakas, as we see in this map, that they shared the southern border with the Guptas. And it would be quite impossible for Chandragupta II to mount a military campaign in the west without taking the support of the Vakatakas. The support of the Vakatakas was essential because it would ensure that the southern flank of the Guptas would be secure. Another reason why this alliance was important because Western Kshatraps would naturally want to ally with the Vakatakas. The Vakatakas had reasons to fear the Gupta attack on Western Kshatraps. The Western Kshatraps could also say to the Vakatakas that after the conquest of the Western Kshatrap territory by the Guptas, the next target of theirs would be the Vakataka territory itself. So it was quite natural for the Vakatakas to feel apprehensive about this Gupta invasion. So because of all this, it was quite important for Chandragupta II to secure an alliance with the Vakatakas. This alliance with the Vakatakas would not only secure the southern flank of the Guptas, but they would also get an ally against the Western Kshatraps. So what Chandragupta II does is that he offers his own daughter Prabhavati Gupta to the crown prince of the Vakatakas, whose name was Rudrasen II. Now this was a brilliant move on Chandragupta II's part because generally it was believed that a weak ruler would offer his daughter to a strong ruler. But here the position was reversed. A Gupta ruler who has control over almost all of northern India was offering his own daughter to a prince of a kingdom that was in no way comparable to the Gupta Empire. For the Vakatakas, it meant that the Guptas were serious in their alliance, and the Vakatakas accepted this offer. Now, this marriage between Prabhavati Gupta and Rudrasen II happened somewhere around 380 AD. And we find that it was after this marriage that Chandragupta II really started to prepare for the military expedition against the Shakas. One of the most important campaign which Chandragupta II did in this preparation was his campaign beyond Hindu Kush. We find that this campaign of Chandragupta II was meant to secure the supply of horses which he was going to need for this military expedition against the Shakas. Having secured the supply of horses, what Chandragupta II needed to do next was to shift his base from the Ganga plains to somewhere close to the Shaka territory. This new base which Chandragupta II chose was Vidisha. We know this because there are some inscriptions that are found from this region that tell us that this became the base of Chandragupta II. So basically there are three inscriptions. So the first inscription is found from a cave in Udaigiri which is close to Vidisha. This inscription records the construction of a Shaiva shrine. The person who constructed this shrine was a fellow named Shab, and his family name was Veersen. Now this was no ordinary fellow. He tells us that he is the Minister of Peace and War, Sandhi Vigrahika, of Chandragupta II. In this inscription, he also boasts that he accompanied his master in the campaign to conquer the world. Our second inscription is also from Udaigiri, and it records a religious gift that was made to a Vaishnav shrine. Now the person who made this gift is not known because the name is not legible, but he calls himself the Maharaj of Sankanikas. Now this Maharaj of Sankanika was a feudatory of Chandragupta II. And in this inscription, the date is also mentioned. So the date is year 82. So the year 82 would be year 82 of the Gupta era, which would mean 401 or 402 AD. Now the third inscription is from Sanchi, which is close to Vidisha. And this records a religious grant that was made by someone called Ambrakar Dav. Now this Ambrakar Dav, he tells us that he is the resident of Patliputra and he is also an important officer of Chandragupta II. In this inscription, the date is also mentioned. So the date is year 93 of the Gupta era. So this would mean that year 412 or 413 AD. Now it cannot be an accident that all of these three inscriptions are from the same region and are commissioned by important Gupta officials. Of the three inscriptions, two clearly tells us that two important Gupta officials visited this region at the start of the 5th century AD. So all of this meant that the region of Vidisha became a center of a massive military operation that Chandragupta II undertook against the Western Kshatraps. Now we exactly don't know how this military operation went, but what is certain is that Chandragupta II managed to completely wipe out the Western Kshatrap power from Western India. How thorough this defeat of the Western Kshatraps were can also be seen from their coins. When Western Kshatraps established their rule in Western India, they started issuing their coins. And there is a continuous line of the Western Kshatrap coins that tell us that they had been ruling this region for more than 300 years. But around the start of 5th century AD, we find that these coins are no longer being issued. So this would mean that the Shaka war started around the close of 4th century AD. Now what is interesting is that at the start of 5th century AD, Chandragupta II is issuing a new type of coin. This new type of coin is a clear imitation of Western Kshatrap coins. And in some of these coins, we have also a date. So the date is year 90, which would mean 409 AD. So this suggests that by the time of 409 AD, the Shaka war had already finished and Chandragupta II had started issuing these coins. Now what we find is that from 409 AD and up to around 415 AD, Chandragupta II issued these coins. We are saying 415 AD because around 415 AD, his son was ruling the Gupta Empire, which would mean that Chandragupta II has died around 415 AD. This assumption that the Shaka war had already ended at the start of 5th century AD can also be corroborated by the inscriptions around Vidisha. So this inscription in Sachi of Amrakar Dav talks about banners of victory, and this inscription is dated to 413 AD. So this would suggest that by the time of 413 AD, the Guptas had already conquered the Shaka territory. So from all of this evidence, we can say that the Shaka war started around the close of 4th century AD, and by the time of 409 AD, the Guptas had managed to completely destroy the Western Kshatrap power. This victory against the Western Kshatraps was the most important achievement of Chandragupta II's reign because it meant the final completion of the imperial policy which Samudragupta had begun. With this conquest, the Guptas had now access over the western trade, and the lucrative ports of western coast were also under their control. How important this conquest was to Chandragupta II can also be seen from his coins. Now we find that Samudragupta, his father, had issued a type of coin which we called Tiger Slayer type coin. So in this coin, Samudragupta is being shown slaying a tiger. Now during the reign of Chandragupta II, he also issued a similar type of coin. But there is a clear difference. Chandragupta II here is not slaying a tiger. He is slaying a lion. And the legend on this coin reads Simha Vikrama, which means having the prowess of a lion. Now some scholars believe that this change from tiger to lion represents the conquest of Gujarat, where lions were found. Now there are some scholars who believe that it was after this Shaka victory that Chandragupta II assumed the title of legendary Vikramaditya, who, according to tradition, expelled the Shaka conquerors of India for the first time some 400 years before. So this is the history of Chandragupta II's most important campaign. If you want to know more about Gupta history, please watch this playlist. Thank you for watching.